Good evening, Longhorns. Thank you for being here and welcome to the University Lecture Series, which is one of the essential elements of your first year at UT Austin. I'm Dr. Patty Moran. I'm Assistant Dean of the First Year Experience and a proud instructor of a signature course called Inside Higher Ed. Whether you're here for class credit or curiosity or just to be inspired, I'm thrilled to see that there is a packed house right now. We have an incredible program ahead featuring 3 dynamic speakers who will explore the theme, You Belong Here, Cultivating Community in a Changing World. Let's give them a round of applause. Their stories, insights, and research will challenge you to think deeply about your place in this university and the world beyond it. Before we begin, a quick note. Please silence your cell phones and your laptops. And you'll see a QR code that has been rotating on the screen as you came in. That's where you can scan to submit questions for our speakers at the end of the lecture. So after our final speaker, we'll wrap up with a short Q&A session. So please stay seated until that evening officially concludes our evening. So again, stay seated for the duration of the Q&A, and we promise to conclude everything by 7 p.m. Okay. Let's see. There we go. Yay. And so our first speaker tonight is Dr. Richard Reddick, a distinguished leader in higher education and a proud Longhorn. Dr. Reddick currently serves as the Senior Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education here at UT. With a career spanning public school teaching, student affair roles at institutions like MIT and Emory, and faculty appointments at UT and Harvard, Dr. Reddick brings a wealth of experience and insight into student success, leadership, and integrity in education. He also teaches a signature course called Black Austin Matters. At this time, I'll turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Richard Reddick.
Thank you, Patty. I haven't said anything yet. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, welcome. It's good to be here. It's good to be here in Hogg Auditorium with my favorite Longhorn family members. So UT 29, can I hear you? Are you here? All right, all right. Some 28s, some 27s, some 26s in there too. So before I get started, I want to make sure I shout out my class, UGS 303, Black Austin Matters. Where are y'all? There you are. Love it. Thank you so much for being here. And look, there's like 1,000 of you here, and I was at DKR on Saturday night, and I'm kind of fired up. So we're going to do Texas Fight. You know how this works. Y'all are Texas, y'all are Fight. It's a competition. Let's see how it goes. So,
Texas, fight! Texas, fight! Texas, fight!
last one. It's a draw. Very good. Excellent. Fantastic. Okay, so now we're all awake. I want to talk to you about my research on mentoring, or what we call developmental relationships. And networks and relationships are important in college. We're social animals. I think you know that. We do better by being in groups versus being by ourselves. As we get started, I want to talk about something you've probably seen on materials before, which are our 6 core values. And those are learning, discovery, freedom, leadership, individual opportunity, and responsibility. And I think one reason I've been asked to speak to you today is because 35 years ago, I was right where you are as a first-year student at UT. Excited, passionate, scared out of my mind. So that's part of the experience. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, but we're also going to talk about how important it is to get involved and engage yourself and build a sense of community as soon as you can. So the thing I think is really important to understand, when you hear our bios as professors, we've done all these things, got these grants, published these books, but honestly, it's like a lifetime achievement kind of thing we've done, right? The day-to-day stuff is not quite that, overwhelming. So I want to tell you my story through some pictures. So there's the first one. Oh, there's the first one. All right. So the first picture you see up there is me and my mom, okay? Because I want you to understand that part of the experience is being close to your family. And your family can be your parents, your guardians, folks back home you consider family, near family, doesn't matter. You're coming to college with those folks in some ways. Maybe not physically, but they're coming in spirit. So I gotta remind you, text, FaceTime, call, do those things. And tell your parents to come visit you as well. We have parent weekend, but make sure they're a part of the experience because you don't get through this thing by yourself. It's something called familial capital. Terry Yoso calls it that. That's something you all have. You all got here because somebody at home supported you. You're gonna get through here with the same kind of effort. There's also a picture in the upper right-hand corner. That's me looking very smooth with the high top fade when I had hair like that. And that's me being involved in a group called the Leadership Board through the Texas Unions. The Texas Union is something you belong all to. Anybody been in the union yet? Right over there? Or WC Powers, that building? Yeah, all part of the union. In fact, this building, Hogg Auditorium, is part of the unions as well. And I put that there because the union is a place you can just simply show up and say, what's going on? Now I know you love Panda Express, that's what you think about when you go to the union, but there's programming, there's events, there's concerts, there's lectures. Those are all things you can get involved in. And the best thing about the union, it's not restricted by major or year. Literally, if you're interested, you just go up to them and say, I want to get involved. And there's so many things you can do. So please think about the union as a possibility for your involvement. Bottom left-hand corner, that circle right there is me in a really cool hat. Orientation advisor. Now, how many of you had an awesome OA when you were, look at this, all the hands are up in the room. This is fantastic. So, first year here at UT, I felt a little bit discombobulated. I was still trying to get my feet into the thing. I didn't quite know how things worked. And a mentor told me, you know something? The best way to understand and learn this place is to become a person who guides people through this place. Become an orientation advisor. And I was like, well, I'm not a super extrovert, or I don't really have a great speaking style. Like, how does that work? But we need orientation advisors from every possible background and identity. And so I got involved with this group, and believe it or not, I got to know what PCL and FAC stood for because that's part of the training, right? I got to understand my degree program because I was actually giving people advice about classes. And I got to tell you, to this present day, there are people in that picture who work here. There are a couple of professors, a couple of directors, academic advisors who are orientation advisors. So you might find yourself on a career path that keeps you on the 40 acres for a while. So think about that. But also, there are tons of jobs on campus to think about. The Single Learning Center hires tutors. The Dean of Students hires peer advisors. Almost every college hires students. Those are the best jobs to have because those jobs actually, we know from research, actually correlate to a higher GPA. And we also know they tend to be more understanding of the student schedule. You work off campus and it's finals, they don't care. You work here during finals, I'm pretty sure your boss will give you a break. So the other thing I want to talk about is spirit. That picture up there in the middle, I'm hooking them horns in my Texas Silver Spurs outfit. And were you on the game on Saturday by any chance? Who's at the game on Saturday? Okay. Good performance, you like that? It was good? All right, more to come. So those are the guys who take care of Bevo. And if you had told me at the age of 18 that I was going to be one day on the sidelines wearing a burnt orange shirt and a cowboy hat, taking care of a 2-ton steer, I would have laughed in your face. But it happened. And it's probably the coolest thing I can talk about because every time I talk about going to UT and somebody's like, oh yeah, hook 'em horns, Bevo. I'm like, hey, I took care of him. And they're like, what? For real. So it was a really cool experience. There are so many spirit organizations to get involved in at UT. And whether you want to be involved with the actual Bevo or a Hellraiser or support a certain team, there's a spirit organization for everybody. So just know that's an opportunity and it's a good way to show your pride and be part of this community that's unique. So, some more pictures. All right, so I also say it's important to think about, for instance, getting to know or start things that are new. So in the upper left-hand corner, I started a group called Texas Blazers about 34 years ago. And that was basically a bunch of friends that said, we need to create an organization that has never existed before. And here at UT, you need 3 people to form a student organization. And a lot of them will last as long as you're here. They'll go away, but every so often they'll stay on. So Texas Blazers are still here, and I'm really proud of that. And that was a really exciting time in my life. Now, because we're the University of Texas, lots of cool things happen here. And so one day, I was on campus, and somebody said, they're doing Wheel of Fortune here. And I thought, oh, Wheel of Fortune on campus, okay, cool. And they mentioned Pat and Vanna. I'm like, oh, that's the real thing. So I tried out for Wheel of Fortune. I got to be on the Wheel of Fortune College Week team, and I won $34,000 cash and $50,000 in scholarship money for UT. So if you have a scholarship from UT, you're welcome. And that was something that was so unique because they came to UT because of our reputation and our name. And I got people in Boston to do hook 'em horns. They didn't know what we were doing, but it was such a cool thing. So, and I'll also let you know this. It ended up being an entryway for a game show sort of experience for me. So, Jeopardy, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, all those shows, I got in those shows, largely in part because I got to do this at UT. So you may find an interesting opportunity like this. We've had a couple of Jeopardy champions here at UT, so if you like trivia, stay alert for that. And then the last thing I will talk about in the bottom corner right there. Oh, this one in the upper right-hand corner. I was a resident assistant. How many of you live in the residence halls on campus? Who's in Dobie? My people. Okay, I was a Dobie RA. So I was an RA for 4 years because it was the best job I ever had. You get to do everything, understand student experiences, help students. And there are people on this campus, again, who I was their RA who work here, which is pretty cool, I think. And it's probably the most, you do everything as an RA, and it's super rewarding. And those folks in that picture, some of them are in my wedding party. That's how close we are. And a couple of them texted me this morning and said, hey, good luck tonight. I told them you're gonna be on camera today. You looked a lot skinnier and had more hair, but nevertheless, just know that this is something that's really cool. So think about doing those kinds of jobs. Bottom left-hand corner. That is a cartoon strip called The Glum Club. It used to be in the Daily Texan. So my buddy Carl, who was also an RA, did a cartoon strip, and he put me in it. So I got to be a cartoon character, which is the coolest thing I've done, I think, pretty much in life, being a cartoon character. And you also don't know what's going to happen to your friends, right? Because your friends, in this room, so many of you are going to be doing amazing, incredible things, right? So it just so happens that this guy, Carl Greenblatt, became an animator and a cartoonist. So he did a show called Chowder, which you might have heard of. And if you heard of a show called Jellystone, that's his show. He does that cartoon. I knew him back in the day. So really cool stuff. So this is all to make you think about, what do you want to tell people when you're doing this lecture? Because one of you will be doing this lecture in a couple of years, right? Patty's looking for you. So you'll go to grad school, you'll become a professor here, and you'll be up here talking about your experiences. So think about what you want to say and what you want to do, what your legacy will be. So, as I conclude, I have a couple of tips for you. The first thing I want to say is to run your race at your own pace. Some of you are already involved in tons of things, and that's great. I'm proud of you. You're going to be involved in more things. Some of you are just like, I'm trying to figure this place out. Both approaches are fine. Do not feel that your roommate or your classmate is doing stuff, you should be doing the same stuff. Do it the way you want to do it. There's a million pathways to the University of Texas. Choose the one that works best for you. Build community, okay? Your peers, professors, staff members, alums, connect with people. I have a rule that I tell my students. Every semester, make 2 friends, 2 peers, 2 staff members, 2 faculty members, because you're gonna need that community as you go forward in life. Make sure you build that community as you're going. And you can build more than 2. If you start with 2 of each, you'll be in pretty good shape. Access the resources you pay for as students. Okay, you pay student fees. The Counseling Mental Health Center, tutoring, you pay for those things. Take advantage of them. And then know that you're here for a purpose, okay? We talked about all these fun things at UT, but also know some things at UT are challenging. That's normal. Expect it, and you'll get through it. And then last, I'll say just one thing I want to make sure you do. Don't have any regrets. Do all the things you want to do at UT. Take some risks. Try some new things. Think about communication, community, curiosity. Okay? I'm proud of all of you, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do in your years in the 40 acres. Hook 'em.
Thank you, Dr. Reddick. Our second speaker is Dr. Craig Watkins, a leading voice in the intersection of technology, society, and ethics. Dr. Watkins is the Ernest A. Sharp Centennial Professor and Executive Director of the IC² Institute at UT Austin, where he explores how artificial intelligence can be designed and used responsibly, especially in areas like healthcare. His work connects cutting-edge research with real-world impact, and he's also the author of 6 books that dive into topics like digital culture and innovation. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Watkins.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Great. Again, like my esteemed colleagues here, thank you so much for turning out. This is wonderful to see such a packed house, and very excited to be here with you this evening. A former UT graduate myself, native Texan. I've lived all over the country, but always intended to make my way back to Austin, to Texas, and was so lucky to do so. And so congratulations to you for getting into what has become a very competitive institution to get into. I have friends all the time now who are saying, I can't get my child into UT. What's going on with that? And so I know that it comes with a lot of hard work, a lot of effort and dedication and aspiration on your part. So congratulations for that. What I thought I would do today is talk to you about what I think is a really interesting dilemma, an interesting challenge that you likely face, that we all face. And that is, I guess about maybe 5 years or so ago, the US Surgeon General released a report. The sort of headline was, loneliness has become kind of an epidemic in this country. And it seems kind of odd in terms of thinking about, when we think of epidemics, we think of disease, we think of medical conditions. We don't necessarily think of loneliness, right, as something that we should be concerned about, or loneliness that could reach epidemic sort of proportions, suggesting, right, that it has significant impact on our health and well-being and on the society and world in which we live. But he just released a significant amount of data and information that essentially sort of supported this idea. And he wasn't alone, right, in terms of this observation. This was certainly, coming in the wake of, COVID, the idea, right, that we were all sort of experiencing tremendous, unprecedented kind of isolation as a result of those unique circumstances. But the reality is, right, is this question around loneliness and what it means to society and what it means to us as individuals is something that's been more than 40 or 50 years in the making. There was a pretty popular book written in 2001 or so by Robert Putnam, a well-known political scientist, called Bowling Alone. How many of you have gone bowling before? Okay, thank you. How many of you have gone bowling and seen someone in the bowling lane next to you bowling by themselves? Have you ever seen someone bowling by themselves? Maybe a couple of hands, but not many, right? And why is that, you think? It's because bowling is primarily, right, a social activity. Most of us will never be professional bowlers. Although there can be some competition in terms of, who strikes down the most pins, we mostly go there, right, for the fun, for the engagement, for the community, for the sort of social convening and opportunity to share a fun time and evening or occasion with family and friends. And what Putnam began to document in his book, and this again was about 20 or 25 years ago, is that Americans' participation in organizations that were sort of communally oriented, that brought us together outside of our homes, outside of work, outside of school, places where we didn't have to go, where we weren't obligated to go, but places where we chose to go, because we knew that there would be people there who shared our interests, who shared our curiosities, who we could bond with, connect with, and experience life with. And so that could be a bowling league, that could be a parent-teacher organization, the PTA association is what it used to be called, faith-based organizations, other kinds of recreational leagues. He began to document, right, how Americans' participation in these kinds of organizations, these kinds of activities, have been declining significantly over the last 40 years or so. And there are a number of reasons for that. I don't have time to go into it, but it sort of suggested, right, that we've been on this curve, if you will, towards becoming more and more isolated from each other. And so a lot of this debate today tends to focus on, obviously, social media, our phones, right, this idea that we spend more time doing this as opposed to actually interacting with people next to us, our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues. And some of that certainly, right, is true. But again, right, there's a pattern that sort of precedes, right, the arrival of digital technology, a pattern that precedes the arrival of smartphones, social media, and all of the things that are oftentimes sort of blamed today for why we experience such profound sense of loneliness in our lives. And so it's likely something that a number of you will experience at some point your time here at the university. This is a large campus. Some of you come from very large urban neighborhoods and communities. Some of you come from smaller, maybe more rural communities and towns. And so the sort of just culture shock of being surrounded by so many people doesn't necessarily mean, right, that you have meaningful connection. And in fact, that's really kind of how those who study this issue of loneliness, it's sort of how they define it, right? It's a sort of discrepancy between our desired need for connection and our real or achieved need for connection. And so loneliness, right, this loneliness epidemic, as you begin to sort of read the literature and sort of study how researchers are beginning to understand this, it's not so much that people feel loneliness in terms of like physical proximity, right? Look around this room, right? You're surrounded by people. You walk this campus every day, you're surrounded by thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, literally. But it's emotional proximity, right, that makes most people feel lonely and isolated, right? This idea, right, that they can't connect to people in an emotional way, in a way that's meaningful, in a way that makes them feel meaningful, in a way that makes them feel cared for, in a way that makes them feel cared about and loved. And so what's happening, right, is a really interesting sort of response to this sort of loneliness crisis or loneliness condition that many of us feel. And you shouldn't be ashamed or feel isolated or feel like you're deficient because you feel this way. It's not uncommon to feel that way, and it's not a bad thing to feel that way, but how do we respond, right, to this condition? How do we respond to this feeling that many of us, right, if not all of us, have experienced to some degree or another? And so one of the things that I spend a lot of my time with in terms of my research is looking at the impact of artificial intelligence. How many of you are using generative AI, things like ChatGPT, Gemini, pretty common these days for you? And what we're seeing, right, and what maybe many of you are experiencing, right, is as we begin to adopt and integrate these technologies into our lives, we're using them in really interesting ways. Now, for many of you, right, your first sort of introduction to ChatGPT and a lot of the sort of public discourse around ChatGPT was perhaps likely around, academic cheating, right, and sort of using ChatGPT to write your paper or using ChatGPT to do your homework. And certainly that, right, was sort of an issue, and we're sort of working around that and building sort of frameworks and guidelines and sort of ethical principles for how we use the technology in ways that are fair, in ways that are ethical, in ways that don't cheat the system, but rather using the technology in ways that enable us to flourish. And that's really important. But a really interesting additional way in which people are beginning to use these technologies is as companions. That is to say, turning to Gemini or turning to ChatGPT or turning to some other AI-based model to sort of get advice from, to confide in, or to share things with, or in some ways, right, just to hang out with. You've likely seen the news, you've likely seen the headlines in terms of some of the tragic situations that have happened as people who have sort of gone down, right, the sort of deep spiral where they've developed, right, a deep emotional connection with what is essentially a machine, right? A machine that ultimately, right, is not empathetic, a machine that can't feel the way that we feel, can experience the world in the way that we experience the world, and yet many feel a deep sense of connection, right, to this technology. And there are all kinds of reasons for it, right? A lot of the research suggests, right, that we confide in these technologies, we develop relationships with these technologies because we can say things to them or share things with them that we may not be able to share with a family member or a friend. For a variety of reasons, right? We may feel as though we're not judged by an AI. The AI doesn't mock us. The AI doesn't make us feel guilty for suggesting something or sharing something with them. And so because of that, right, there's a tendency, right, to feel a little bit more relaxed or a little bit more open to sharing things that may in fact be very private, sharing things that may in fact be very personal, sharing things that may actually require, right, some type of human connection, if not intervention. And so one of the things I want to suggest to you, right, is not so much that developing a relationship with AI is a bad thing. We're all developing some type of relationship to the technology in the world around us. That's just simply a fact of life. But how do you begin to establish boundaries? How do you begin to understand, right, what's a safe connection, what's a safe relationship, and how do you protect yourself from some of the dangers that we're beginning to see, both in the world of research, but also in the real world, in terms of these technologies oftentimes letting people down when they're at their deepest and most vulnerable point in life. And the idea, right, is that while it may be able to provide you with some advice, it may be able to provide you with some suggestions about how you manage a personal relationship, how you deal with a crisis or an emergency that you're dealing with. But the reality is, right, is that finding human connection, in finding people to sort of provide support for you, finding people, right, who can care about you, finding people who can connect you to other resources that might be able to support and bring you through a tough moment is really important. And so it's not a matter of if you will encounter a tough moment here. You absolutely will. We all experience tough moments in life. We all experience tough moments in college. That's part of the experience. That's part of what we learn in terms of dealing with adversity. And so my sort of suggestion to you is as you begin to sort of think about this world and begin to think about how do you get through that challenging period or that challenging moment, right? If you're having a tough experience with a friend or a roommate, right? Other things are happening, right, that may be bringing you some discomfort, some pain, or some uncertainty or anxiety. Again, those things aren't strange. You shouldn't feel ashamed about that. But how do you go about finding connection? How do you go about finding resources? How do you begin to go about finding support to help bring you through that? And that's something that we all have to work through, and that's something that we all have to deal with in terms of how we manage the world around us. And so while it's okay, certainly, to have these digital technologies, to use them, to integrate them into our lives, again, figuring out how you can do it in a way that's safe, figuring out how you can do it in a way that maintains your sense of control over how you begin to advocate for yourself, how you begin to find resources to help support you is really important. And what I want to suggest to you, right, is that this university, like many universities, has enormous resources or significant resources, dedicated resources to provide you that kind of support. There's counseling here at the university. Student Services Building, for example, has a great staff there. But each college has its own sort of, I think, peer kind of health counselor. So if you're in the College of Communication, if you're in liberal arts, if you're in natural sciences, architecture, fine arts, whatever the case might be, there are likely resources within your own respective institutions, within your own respective academic departments and colleges that can provide you with this support. And so you're not alone, even though it may seem like you feel alone at times. You're really not, right? There's a huge sense of urgency, right, to provide you with support, to sort of build resources, to build an infrastructure to help pull you through those times and challenges that you encounter throughout your experience here. And so that's something that I wanted to share with you in terms of what we're beginning to understand and what we're beginning to learn is how do you establish those boundaries? How do you begin to understand when it's safe and when it's not safe to become reliant upon or dependent upon technology to help you sort of navigate the kinds of challenges that you will encounter, certainly the kinds of challenges that you'll face. And so, again, thank you for being here. Congratulations for being here. And I wish you all much success. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Watkins. Our final speaker of this evening is Mark Strama. He currently serves as the director of the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life. The institute, which is housed in the Moody College of Communication, prepares the next generation of civic leaders through education, research, and professional development. As director, he has worked to expand the institute's focus to local government issues and examine the ways social media might help repair political divisions. He teaches a signature course titled Pathways to Civic Engagement. Please welcome Director Mark Strama.
Okay, I'm going to go out of order. This was going to be at the end of my speech, but I'm going to tell you right now, as mostly first-year students at the University of Texas, you probably are experiencing imposter syndrome. I'm experiencing imposter syndrome. I'm standing in front of 1,000 of y'all. I'm on this stage with Dr. Reddick and Dr. Watkins. I'm not a doctor. All I got is a bachelor's degree and a lifetime career in politics and business. Here's what you need to know. Everyone experiences imposter syndrome, unless they're a pathological narcissist. So if you're feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome, you should pat yourself on the back because it means you're probably not a pathological narcissist. Congratulations. And also, when you're in a room where you feel out of place, you should know everyone else in the room does too. In my experience, I worked at Google for 10 years. I was a politician for 10 years. In my experience, the person who feels imposter syndrome most acutely in any room is the highest ranking person in the room. Because everybody's staring at them like they're supposed to know the answer. They're like, how come everybody's looking at me? Everybody experiences it. Okay, I was a politician for 10 years. I'm gonna walk you through some slides that I often present to politicians to help them navigate the incredibly conflicted world we live in right now. I teach about polarization in the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life. I hope you will come to one of our events. Talks a lot about ways we can come together across political divides. Can somebody tell me what they see in that picture? A duck, somebody said. Does anybody think he's wrong? A rabbit, some of you think. Let me tell you, this time you're both right. If you look at a face pointing that direction with its ears pointing that direction, you see a rabbit. If you look at a face pointing that direction, you should see the duck. Now that you know, how many of you can see both? And do you think that, given time, you could rationally explain to someone who sees a different animal than what you see there, how to see the animal you see? Because you can in that picture. What's so funny? What color is that dress? Okay. Okay. Some of you see a white and gold dress. Raise your hand if you see white and gold like I do. Okay. And raise your hand if you see blue and black. Okay, I just want you to know which ones of you are crazy in the room. Because this picture, not only, it was like exactly 10 years ago, 10 and a half years ago, that this picture went viral and nearly broke the internet, nearly caused millions of people to get divorced, and launched a whole new field of neuroscience research, because never before in history had two people been able to stand side by side, look at the same picture, and see different things. So let me tell you what the neuroscience research uncovered. That picture was taken on an old camera through a window with a glare. It's highly pixelated. It's backlit. And what the neuroscientists have figured out is there's not enough data in that picture for your brain to know what color the dress is. When I see it, I see a white and gold dress. Many of you do too. It is a real dress. So we actually know what color it is. And if I had the dress here, we would all see the same colored dress. And I'm going to tell you what color the dress actually is, but I don't want half of you to think you're smarter than the other half, because I just told you the neuroscience research says you can't tell what color the dress is. It's actually blue and black. I know it's blue and black, and yet I see nothing but white and gold even after it's been explained to me. Even unlike the duck rabbit picture, there's no way I can see it differently. Because when your brain is confronted with ambiguity, it replaces that ambiguity with something incredible: conviction, certainty. Now think about all the areas in life where we really don't have enough information to know for sure. But how many people do you know who properly respect the uncertainty and ambiguity and complexity in the world? Versus what we all did with this dress, replace our ambiguity with certainty and conviction. Conviction that made you look at your friends in this room and say, "You're crazy." It's a pretty apt metaphor for politics. If you think that I am making this up, what color are those strawberries? There's not a red pixel in that image. Your brain knows that strawberries are red, so it uses its priors. Have you heard the phrase confirming your priors? It uses its priors to cause you to see red. The actual color you're looking at when you look at the red strawberry is that gray circle in the middle there. This is all detailed in a book called How Minds Change, and the thesis of this book isn't that knowing these things can help you change people's minds. It's that when you know, your cognitive tendency to replace ambiguity with certainty, your own mind develops plasticity, develops tolerance, develops humility and understanding that is critical to bridging divides. Okay, that's what we talk about at the Annette Strauss Institute for Civic Life. I'd love to see you at some of our events. Then when I got here, I realized we're really supposed to talk about belonging, and I thought, I have a daughter who is a first-year student in college this year too. And so I got the 6-page letter out that I wrote to her when she left, and I pulled some of it to share with y'all. First, let me say I'm so proud to be your father. Okay, I know I'm not all your father. But I guarantee you this. There is someone somewhere in the world as proud of you right now as I am of my daughter. Second, everybody has imposter syndrome. Third, say yes. I don't even care what the question is most of the time. Say yes. You're on the next 12 years of your life will be the most rapid acquisition of knowledge, not counting when you were little. For the next 12 years, you are a sponge. You are going to learn and grow so much. And every time you have the choice to say yes or no, it's almost always going to be the right choice to say yes. Obviously, don't abuse that, but I had a practice in my 20s that I would never decline an invitation. Often, I wanted to say no. And often, saying yes put me in a situation that wasn't any fun, with people I didn't like, doing things I didn't enjoy. But I always said yes, which meant that the rare times that lightning struck, and something magical happened, and I made a lifelong friend or found a mentor, I was there because I hadn't said no. It's a numbers game. Put yourself in the path of opportunity. Here's what I told her about phones. And before I tell you this, let me share with you a story that she would not appreciate me sharing in front of 1,000 of her peers. When she was going to go to a camp, when she was about 16, the day before she left, my wife said, make sure you just send us a text every night so we know you're okay. And she burst out crying because she thought there were no phones allowed at this camp. And so I said, forget it. Don't send us a text. You don't have to take your phone. She said, that's not the problem. The problem is if everybody else has their phones, we're all going to be zombies and no one's going to talk to each other. You guys were born, how many of you were born in 2007? You know what else was born in 2007? The iPhone. And listen, I love technology. I've spent half of my career in the technology industry. And since the iPhone came along, you've never been lost. You have no idea what it used to be like. We used to be lost all the time. Nobody knew where anything was. They're great. Use them appropriately, but don't overdo it. When I started working here, they did a profile of me in the Moody College newsletter, and the first question they asked was, what advice would you give your former self if you could go back to when you were in college? And I said, take more photos. And then they said, what advice would you give to today's college students? And I said, take less photos. Listen, it's a collective action problem. You can't single-handedly disassociate yourself from your phone and plug into your friends if everybody else isn't doing the same. Be sensitive to that. The phone often disconnects you from your peers, and you'll be missing the best part of college. Here's the other thing I want you to know about your phone. We were not designed cognitively to scroll past just this range of emotions that are presented to us. Oftentimes, you get off not only feeling in a dark place, but you feel disoriented. It's worse for us because we got friends going through whole different stages of life, and we're going from the hospital to the wedding to the baby being born, and it is just a roller coaster ride. The technology companies aren't doing it for you. You've got to find a way to slow that ride down. And the last thing I'll tell you is you will get back from the world the energy that you put into it. My daughters, I always tell them, because it's very hard to make the first move when you're meeting your peers. Everybody feels like you do, and everybody welcomes your interest in them. You will get back from the world the energy you put into it. I'm so proud of all of you, even though you're not my daughter. Congratulations on being a freshman at the University of Texas.
Thank you, Director Strama. So please stay seated and join me in giving another round of applause to thank all three of our speakers tonight. And we have just enough time for maybe one or two questions. So here are some that have come in. So this is open to all of the speakers, and feel free to answer in whatever order you would like. So one question came in about how have you cultivated relationships through unexpected avenues?
That's a great question. So this goes back to what Professor Strama said. So be open for lots of opportunities. So the one thing that I didn't do as an undergrad that I wish I had done was study abroad. But I finally studied abroad as a professor. And so I lead a study abroad to Oxford, England. And back to this idea, we go to Oxford, and it's a great university city. We go to the Harry Potter, cafeteria, all cool things happen. But we get lost. Students get lost, students have to find their way through things. And it's often those experiences where you have to figure out how to get from St. Pancras in London to Oxford with 10 pounds. You figure it out. So I think those kinds of things, those kinds of opportunities of doing something that's unexpected, by all means do that.
This is a weird story, but there's a useful life lesson in it. When I was just out of college, I worked on a campaign for governor. The candidate's name was Ann Richards. She surprised us all and won. So then I had the chance to go work in her office as governor. But during the campaign, and when I thought we were going to lose, I had made friends with a newly elected state senator from Houston named Rodney Ellis, and he had offered me a job in his Senate office. When Ann won, the conventional wisdom was go work for the governor, the most powerful politician in the state. And I don't remember how I made this decision, but I chose instead to go work for this newly elected state senator. And it was the best decision I ever made because I would have been one of dozens of 20-somethings in the governor's office with a portfolio like this big. But by going to work for a new state senator who didn't have a staff and was just getting started, I was able to grow into the job with him, He became my mentor. He officiated my wedding when I ran for office 14 years later. He was my biggest supporter. I learned everything I know about politics from him, and I couldn't have had the same experience if I'd gone the more obvious path. Now, don't go crazy going on the non-obvious paths, but sometimes the road less traveled is the right path. And the other lesson in that story is find mentors. In your 20s, the best thing that can happen to you is to find somebody who is invested in your development.
Excellent. And so the other question that came in several times wanted to know what was something you struggled with in your first year of college?
Where do we start, right? I think for me, my first year was, I think, obviously like everyone, generally speaking, you're discovering yourself, you're discovering what it means to be at a university. Some of you maybe have an idea of what it is you want to pursue academically and kind of have career aspirations. Although I suspect, right, that some of you may not, and that's absolutely a fine place to be in. That's where I was, right? I had some ideas about what I thought my career path might be, subject matters that I like, things that I like to do, but it really wasn't until maybe my second or third year that I really sort of figured out like what I thought I wanted to pursue and began to essentially design like an academic plan to pursue that. And so this first year, right, just really treat it, right, as a year of discovery. Treat it as an opportunity to learn not only about this university and the wonderful things that it offers you, but really about yourself, right? And exposing yourself to different ideas, exposing yourself to different organizations, through your courses, through the people that you'll meet, through the various activities that will happen around this campus. There's nothing like a university campus, right? In terms of, you will see things this year, be exposed to ideas, be exposed to events, be exposed to opportunities that most people in their lifetimes will never get a chance to be exposed to. And as a result of that, right, the opportunity for self-discovery to sort of reinvent yourself is really incredible. So use this first year, right, not as a year to think you have to figure it all out, that you have to know the answer, that you have to know what you want to do. You'll figure that out, right, and that'll happen for you. And so that was really, when I reflect back, I didn't know that, and I could not have articulated it back then. But that's really what my first year, really my first 2 years were about.
Yeah, this is a great question. I struggled academically my first year. My first semester went okay. Second semester, I got hit by a ton of bricks. I did not seek out help. I felt embarrassed and ashamed to do it. I thought everybody else knew what was going on, and I didn't. So I kind of sat there and just took it. And by the time I realized I was in academic trouble, it was really late. And that led to, I think, low-key depression. So I believe the term you guys use is crashed out. So it was a very tough semester, and it was only because I had mentors, back to Mark's point, who said to me, you know, you're capable of doing this. You just got to learn to get help when you need it, first and foremost, and you got to forefront your mental health. Like, if you're studying all day and you're not making progress, try something else. Go to the Sanger Learning Center. Talk to your professors, go to office hours, do these different things. And then back to my point about running your own race at your own pace, some of us are gonna blossom. Some of you are blossoming right now, good. Some of you are gonna take a little bit longer. And it won't be until the second or the third year or the fourth year you really figure out how it works. Life is long, God willing, right? So just know that it's okay if you have some difficulties, because life happens, right? Relationships happen, things are happening in your life, and you have to deal with all those things, probably the first time by yourself. But just know you have assistance and you have help. And please look for the help as soon as you get it. And back to our point earlier, you're not alone. Just too many resources on this campus to suffer in silence.
The only thing I'd add is, because I think I had the similar experiences, the only thing I'd add is, y'all, to get into this school, have achieved at an incredibly high level, and you probably haven't, a lot of you have never made a B. And so you're gonna probably make a B. And that first setback is gonna be a moment of truth. And it was for me, and it's really, in a way, the best thing that can happen to you is to have that first setback and prove to yourself that you can overcome it.
Excellent. Thanks our speakers again. And thanks to you all for attending our 2025 University Lecture Series. Have a wonderful rest of your semester, and hook 'em horns.